at number 10, we have the wailing lover of Spandau Citadel. Firstly, let's just have a little moment to appreciate how bloody beautiful the Berlin Citadel is. What a Renaissance glory. The building was finished in 1594 and is one of the best preserved military structures of its time. It seriously is really beautiful and kind of romantic to look at. As it happens, the building is home to a twisted love story, but not just that, it's home to a heartbroken ghost. Back when Germany was a collection of states, Berlin was known as Brandenburg. From 1535 until his death in 1571, the state was ruled by Joachim II. Joachim was married to Hedwig of Poland, but in 1549 she suffered a terrible accident that rendered her unable to walk without crutches. Joachim then decided to take his affections elsewhere. He took a lover, Anna Saido, who is regularly dubbed as the Beautiful Foundress. Joachim asked his son on his deathbed to look after Anna, but he threw her behind bars and she was imprisoned until she died. To this day, it's said that she never left. She roams the halls looking for Joachim to set her free, but he never will. Sometimes dissonant wails can also be heard. Coming in at number 9, we have the limping monk of the Graus Cloister. You have to love a good old Gothic monastery. There is almost no way one of those babies isn't haunted by some kind of ghoul or trapped, repressed religious spirit. So sitting in ruins on the Klosterstrasse is the Church of the Francian Monastery. The place may be in ruins today, but it has a long and interesting, fraught history dating back to the 1250. Sadly, the majority of the church was destroyed in 1945 during the bombing of Berlin. These days, part of the church's early history seems to still remain in the form of a limping monk. I totally feel him. I recently really hurt my toe and I feel like a bit of a limping monk. He's nasty though, this one. This monk was said to have walled up his son and left him to die in the monastery. His malicious presence can still be felt today, although he seems to have gone off walling people, which is good. He just pinches them instead. To be honest, I'd rather be pinched than walled. Coming in at number 8, we have the ghost of the Reichstag. The Reichstag has been the on and off seat of German political power since it was built by Bismarck in 1894. Since then, it has been rebuilt twice, in 1933 following the suspicious Reichstag fire, and again after the Second World War as the building was once again destroyed. Since Germany was reunified, the building was restored and became the meeting place of the German Parliament once again in 1999. A lot of people consider the building to be haunted by the political ghost of Hitler, but in reality, he absolutely hated the place and he never even set foot there after the Nazis rose to power. Politics aside, the building is thought to be haunted by actual ghosts too. Many former country leaders and possibly even Van der Lubbe, the Dutchman accused of starting the Reichstag fire, are said to haunt the halls. Now, Van der Lubbe didn't die in the blaze, but he was executed as a result. The emotional trauma the event had on his life may explain an imprint on the building. Coming in at number 7 and sticking with the Reichstag, we have an urban legend from Hitler's time. The Reichstag fire was said to have been prophesized. The Reichstag fire was the talk of the town in 1933 and of course caused a big stir and a huge political scandal, perhaps even a constitutional crisis. 3 days before the fire happened, Erik Jan Hannesson, a famous clairvoyant, predicted the blaze. The story of Hannesson is especially fascinating. He was a Jewish performer who would present magical and hypnotic skits across Berlin. Now, it seems that he sensed the rise in Nazi strength and he decided to try and win favor with the party. Now, this was a dangerous move for a Jewish man. He lied about his heritage and managed to win favor, even performing with Hitler on stage. While he had the public convinced, it seemed his clairvoyance might not have been a natural gift. He may have been privy to intel that the arson attack was planned. When Hitler caught wind of his prediction, it is alleged that he had Hannesson killed. He was killed on the 25th of March 1933, and his body was found in a field on the outskirts of Berlin. Bringing it back to the modern day at number 6, we have the mystery of Berghain. Berlin is known as the home of techno music, even though it originated in Detroit. In Berlin, there is a nightclub called Berghain. Now, this is north of the Spree in the Friedrichshain neighborhood. This nightclub is notoriously hard to get into, and the bouncer, Sven Merkart, he's here, have a look at him, say hi. He's the one who gets to decide whether or not you make the cut, but nobody can figure out exactly why. It's a total mystery. It's said that it helps if you wear black, but nothing is ever a given with this place. Some people queue for 3 hours to get a chance at gaining admission to the nightclub, and many of those have been turned away, simply have no idea why, and they just have to go home. Some people claim the mystery door policy is racist, sexist, heterophobic, homophobic, xenophobic, all the phobics. Other people, however, think that there is something stranger going on. They think that Sven and those behind Bargain are in a secret cult, and those that get in know something that we don't. What goes on inside that industrial estate mansion, no one will ever tell you, including those who've been inside. There is a strict no photo policy in the club. Coming in at number 5, we have the ever-present legends of the Führer bunker. What happened to Hitler in his Berlin bunker as Nazi Germany fell has been the topic of much speculation. In fact, the Berlin bunker has been the focal point for a number of wild theories and urban legends for nearly 80 years. The generally accepted course of events is that Hitler committed suicide in his bunker on the 30th of April 1945, but his body has never been found. When his bunker was stormed, the Führer was nowhere to be seen, and Soviet leader Joseph Stalin was convinced that he was still alive. Berlin was scoured from top to bottom, but nobody could find him. A lot of conspiracy theories say that the bunker was more complex than at first suspected, and that somehow he managed to escape to Argentina. Some urban legends even suggest that the United States government were in on his escape, allowing him passage to South America in exchange for assurance that Germany would surrender. A lot of this makes up the drama in the docu-film Grey Wolf. Others think that he simply lived out his years in disguise in Berlin. You know what? Without a body, we may never know. Coming in at number 4, we have the Ghost Wall. Along the Orenburger Straße sits the Ghost Wall. According to popular urban legend, this section of wall is haunted by 2 spirits of children from an unknown time period. That being said, the area was subject to heavy bombardment at the end of World War II, so it could be that they were killed in a 1945 aerial attack. It seems that the kids will grant you a wish if you stick a penny in the crumbling wall. Now, the proviso is that the wish must be modest and completely unselfish. If you do that, the children may well set about granting you that wish. To be honest, while ghosts are scary, these 2 spirits seem pretty friendly. I love me a benevolent ghost like Casper. Coming in at number 3, we have the abandoned Spree theme park and the fire of 2014. Opening in 1969 as the Kolperpark Planten World in East Germany, the amusement park was better known as the Spree Park. Despite surviving the fall of the Berlin Wall, the park closed due to insolvency in 2002 and is now one of the most famous ghost theme parks in the world. The park is closed to the public, but of course that hasn't stopped urban explorers investigating the place and taking a number of eerie pictures. The park owner was a dubious chap linked to a Peruvian drug ring. He was arrested and sent to jail for 7 years for trying to smuggle 180 kilos of cocaine from Peru to Germany in 2004. In 2014, a large part of the park was destroyed by fire. Firefighters indicated that 2 blazes merged to form one bigger fire, suggesting it may have been arson. Who lit the match and why they wanted the park to burn? We just don't know. Coming in at number 2, we have the nuclear secrets of Volgasang. Volgasang is an abandoned city in the Brandenburg Forest that was built by the Soviet Union in 1951. In its day, the city was home to around 15,000 soldiers and civilians, as well as a whole bunch of nuclear weapons. It is thought that the city held atomic weapons ready to launch at West Europe at the touch of a button. 4 of the weapons stored in this town were allegedly set up to hit the United Kingdom. The bombs stored here were said to be 20 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Nobody but high-ranking Soviets were informed that the missiles were housed in the town. Now, no living souls are present in the town, but there are questions as to whether there are a few unliving ones trapped forever among the rubble and hiding the town's nuclear secrets for an eternity. Finally, coming into number 1, we have one of the greatest Berlin mysteries. We have the bright lights of Brieselang. Brieselang is a park on the outskirts of Berlin. In 1945, a young girl, 12 years old, her name Elizabeth Weiger, was raped and murdered by Soviet soldiers. Perhaps it was this trauma, or the trauma of the war in general, but since the late 1940s, mysterious lights have been spotted dancing in the sky above the forest. The phenomenon gained national and international attention, and in the 1980s and up until this day, people still try and visit the park in order to see the dancing lights. There are a few grainy YouTube videos out there, but really, you need to see them for yourself. Now, the lights are reported to be white, red, and green. They flicker on and off and appear in random spots. Not only that, that, many people have reported hearing voices around the parks, whisperings and wails. There's also a very, very creepy abandoned inn next to the park, which adds to a sense of unease. Some people do try and explain the lights as a natural phenomenon related to the ability of the soil to store gases, but a lot of people consider this explanation to be tenuous. A lot of people just want to believe that actually there are spirits in the forest.
Starting off at number 10 now, we have the Wrestle von Konnersreuth. That's a mouthful. This is a mystery surrounding Theresa Neumann, also known as the Wrestle von Konnersreuth. She was born in Bavaria in 1898 and lived a life shrouded in mystery and dominated by Nazi persecution. She also built up a devout Catholic following around her who believed she was connected to God. Now, she claimed to have been able to cure herself of ailments on multiple occasions throughout her life. At the age of 27, she was said to have cured herself from appendicitis, and then later on she healed herself from blindness. Then came the stigmata. Wounds began to appear on her hands and her feet in the same places where Jesus would have been nailed to on the cross. She also claimed that from the age of 25 onwards, she did not eat or drink a thing. Investigators were skeptical and observed her over 15 days, and they found that she did not eat anything during that time. Opinion is divided on the authenticity of her claims though. Some even believe they happened but are quite fearful of her. To this day though, she still has many adoring fans who are hoping she will one day become a saint. Next up at number 9 now, we have the White Lady. This one goes back hundreds of years ago and revolves around a girl named Anna Seidau. The King of Brandenburg, Joachim II, took her as his lover despite already having 2 wives. The two lived happily in the Grunwald, an area just outside of Berlin. They also had 2 children together. Sadly, their son died at the age of 9, but their daughter grew up to be Magdalene of Brandenburg, Countess of Arnberg. When Joachim succumbed to illness, he requested that one of his sons from a previous marriage, Johann, take care of Anna. Johann did not keep his promise. He kept Anna as a prisoner in Spandau Citadel. He married off Magdalene into a forced marriage. Anna remained a prisoner in her tower until her death, locked up and mistreated with the knowledge that her daughter's life was a misery. She died with anger in her heart. Now, locals say that Anna still wanders the galleries of Spandau Citadel. Visitors report seeing the ghostly figure of a white lady roaming around, unable to leave and seemingly unaware of her surroundings. A morbid turn to this story came just a few years ago when restoration workers found bones in the citadel believed to be Anna's. They gave her a proper burial in the hopes of putting her spirit to rest, but if reports are true, it was to no avail. Next up at number 8 now, we have the Children's Crusade. This is a pretty creepy story from the 13th century. Legend says that a German boy was visited by Jesus. Jesus told him to lead a crusade of children to Jerusalem and peacefully convert Muslims to Christianity. He convinced 30,000 followers to join him and led them south towards the Mediterranean Sea. Now, he believed the sea would part for him like Moses and they would just walk along the sea floor towards Jerusalem. The sea did not part though, and the children were captured by various groups. Some of them were sold into slavery, others died in shipwrecks, others simply died from starvation or exhaustion. Moving on to number 7 now, we have Maria. Maria Renita Singer was a Bavarian nun who became famous in Germany in the early 18th century. If you're thinking she became famous for being an excellent nun, well, you come to the wrong video. She was notorious for being a witch. She became a nun in Bavaria in 1699 at the age of 19. She rose up the ranks and by 1740 she was appointed sub-prioress of her convent. In 1746, one of her nuns, Cecilia, became afflicted with convulsions and claimed to be possessed by demons and poltergeists. The attacks also started to affect other nuns too. One of them even died. At that point, people began accusing Maria of being a Satanist and a sorcerer. The Catholic Church then conducted an exorcism during which the nuns rolled on the ground and, quote, howled and snapped like mad cats. The investigators searched the convent, including Maria's room. They found poisons, ointments, and strange robes. They confronted her with the evidence and she confessed. Maria admitted that she was a Satanist and a witch. She said that at the age of 7 she swore herself to Satan. Age 12 she became a prostitute and learned magic and how to mix potions. In 1694 she was baptized at a black mass, and in 1699 she had entered the nunnery to infiltrate and corrupt them. Well, it certainly worked. She was remorseful about what she had done, but the church still found her guilty of sorcery and executed her. Next up at number 6 now, we have the Hinterkaifeck murders. In 1922, an entire family living at the Hinterkaifeck farm in Germany were killed by blows from a pickaxe. The parents, their widowed daughter, her children and the housekeeper were all found dead. 4 4 of them in the barn and 2 of them in their beds. Here's a really creepy thing. The murderer continued to live at the farm afterwards, with the family's dead bodies just there for some time. Police knew this because the animals were still being fed, neighbours saw smoke coming from the chimney, and when they arrived to investigate, the dog was tied up outside the barn. It gets creepier. Before the murders, the family had reported hearing footsteps in the attic. They saw footsteps in the snow that led from the woods to the house, but not the other way, and they also found claw marks on the door of the tool shed. That's where they kept the pickaxe that was used to kill them. The crime was never solved. Next up at number 5 now we have Lorelei. According to German folklore, there was once a nymph that lived by the Rhine River. If you aren't familiar with what that is, nymphs are said to be mythological spirits of nature that usually take the form of a beautiful woman. Lorelei lived on top of a steep rock. She was said to dress in white and wore a wreath of stars in her hair. They said that she was beautiful, but that she also sang a song so haunting and hypnotizing that no sailor could resist her aura. No one who was drawn to her ever returned to tell the tale. Instead, they would be dashed against the rocks. Today, a statue marks the spot where Lorelei has been spotted over the years. Some take it as a warning to turn back before it's too late. Moving on to number 4 now, we have the Rubsal. In German folklore, this is a mountain spirit. He's also a giant. He roams the mountains and is known for his love of trickery. He's friendly to good people and will teach them medicine and even give them presents sometimes. If someone annoys him though, they can expect a harsh trick pulled on them. The legend of Rubsal has been around for thousands of years, going right back to pagan times. They say he is the fantastic lord of weather and is similar to the legend of the wild hunt that we actually talked about in another video. He has great powers and can summon lightning and thunder, fog, rain and snow from the mountain above, even while the sun is shining. He may take the appearance of a monk and sometimes he holds a harp. I'm not sure how scary a harp is, but yeah, there you go. Moving on to number 3 now, we have King Watzmann. As the story goes, this king once ruled the lands of southern Bavaria. He was a bloodthirsty leader with absolutely no regard for human life. Locals said he was an evil man, and they had good reason to think so. Apparently, he and his family enjoyed hunting local peasants. That's right, they rode around just killing their own people for sport. One day though, their terrors caught up to them. After slaughtering a whole family, they were cursed. The whole family was turned to stone for their sins and entombed in the Berchtesgaden mountain range. To this day, locals say the 7 peaks there are actually the 7 members of the family, forever encased in stone. Next up at number 2 now, we have the story of Princess Brunhilde. In Germany's Harz mountain range lies the Rostrap Hill. It's ancient and gnarled, sometimes difficult to climb, but those who do are awarded with an interesting sight, a hoof print in the rock on the cliff's edge. Now legend has it that this is where Princess Brunhilde escaped from a giant named Bodo who wanted to marry her. He chased her on her horse to the cliff edge, at which point her white stallion jumped across and reached the other side, while Bodo jumped after her and plunged to his death. The hoof print in the rock is said to be from the horse launching itself off the cliff. For the locals, it's a dark reminder of the magic that some say still exists in that place and a bloodthirsty giant that fell to his doom. And finally, number 1 now, we have the Sleeping King. According to official sources, the legendary King Frederick Barbarossa drowned in modern-day Turkey during the Third Crusade. According to this legend though, he never died, he's just sleeping. People say he still sleeps in a hidden chamber underneath the Kyffhauser Hills. They say he sits motionless at a stone table and his beard has kept growing over the centuries. They say he waits there until his country's hour of greatest need, where he will awaken from his slumber and emerge from under the hill. They say the ravens on the hill is a sign of his presence there, and that if they ever disappear, Barbarossa will be emerging very soon. Now some people might love that sight, others might be a bit disturbed at the sight of a 900-year-old undead king stumbling towards them. How do you feel? At number 10 now, we have the Morbach monster. The town of Wittlich is said to be the last place in Germany where a werewolf was spotted and killed. The story goes that a soldier named Thomas Schweitzer raided a farmhouse there with some soldiers. They murdered the family, and according to legend, as Thomas killed the husband husband and sons, the wife laid a curse on him. From now on, at each full moon you will change into a rabid wolf, she cried. From that day on, he began to change. He became more brutal and murderous. His appetite for violence and blood grew too much, and his fellow soldiers actually left him. He eventually abandoned civilization altogether and chose to live feral in the woods. Locals began to talk of the Wolfman who lived out there in the trees. Then the killings began. The Wolfman was blamed for the brutal slaughter of people and livestock. Nobody suspected it was Thomas until he raped a local girl called Elizabeth. A group of villagers confronted him and demanded that he pay for his crimes. He fled but was confronted near the village of Moorbach. They killed him, and in order to stop him from returning as a werewolf, a shrine with a candle was placed at the gravesite. Legend says that as long as a candle is kept burning there, the creature shall be bound to the grave. 9 months later, Elizabeth gave birth to a son which, to her relief, showed no sign of the curse and whose descendants still live in the area today. The story doesn't end there though. In 1988, a group of US Air Force personnel were returning to a local base and passed by the shrine. They noticed the candle had gone out and they mocked the local superstition that a werewolf was now on the loose. That evening, sirens went off when someone activated the sensor's perimeter. The guards reported seeing a large wolf-like creature standing on its hind legs. It stared for a moment at the guard before jumping over a 3-meter high fence. They tried to use dogs to track the creature, but the dogs refused to follow the scent. Make of this story what you will, but the dogs certainly knew something we didn't. Next up at number 9 now, we have Wildneil Hoster School. This building used to be a place of learning until the Nazis arrived there. They claimed the Franciscan brothers who ran the school were charging too much and kept suing them because of it. Their plan worked. The brothers filed for bankruptcy and left the place in 1937. After that, the Nazis stepped in. They turned it from a school for disabled children to an extermination centre for them. There were 200 beds where disabled miners stayed before being gassed with carbon monoxide. They did it slowly. A death could be drawn out over a week. When the war was finally over, it was found that 97 children had been killed. Their causes of death range from wasting to pneumonia to cardiovascular weakness. In the years since then, people have reported hearing the sounds of children crying in the hallways at night or weeping where their beds used to be. Some have even described the sound of wails of pain echoing down through the years. At number 8 now, we have the marksman. The story goes like this. One day, a marksman went out hunting for deer and wild boars. However, the dark autumn forest made it hard to see them. He was approached by a shady salesman who covered his face. The man offered the marksman 7 bullets with one condition. The first 6 bullets will hit whatever the marksman wants to hit, but the man gets to choose where the 7th one goes. The marksman agrees. He quickly becomes famous in the town, bringing home kill after kill. He catches the eye of the prettiest girl in the town and they fall in love. Soon though, all 6 bullets were used up, and when he shoots the 7th, it goes astray and hits his love in the chest, killing her instantly. The salesman then appears to the grieving marksman and reveals himself as the devil. He tells the marksman that if he lives a good life now, he will be reunited with the girl after death. He tries this but soon falls in love with another girl and marries her instead. 1 year to the day after the fatal incident, the marksman rode through the forest where he came to a clearing. Skeletons were dancing around cold flames there. One of the skeletons belonged to the girl that he first loved. It entranced him and he danced with it into the night. The next morning, the villagers found him and his horse dead at the edge of the forest. Moving on to number 7 now, we have Babenhausen Barracks. This place is known as one of the most haunted places in all of Germany. As you can tell from the name, it was originally a barracks. Now it's a museum, but that hasn't stopped the hauntings there. According to local legend, on certain nights, the ghosts of German soldiers, some of them in World War II uniforms, can be seen wandering the grounds. Lights will flicker off and then on again at the same time as voices coming from the basement. If all of that wasn't enough, footsteps have been heard along with the occasional command barked in German, presumably for the soldiers who once lived there. Locals say that if a soldier happens to visit the museum and pick up a telephone, a woman can be heard on the other end talking backwards. What she's saying will be completely unintelligible. It's not German or English, but it just sounds backwards. What's the reason for all of this? Well, some say it's because the barracks is built on the site where a witch was burnt at the stake by soldiers many years ago. In death, she now seduces and kills any soldiers who dare to get close to the barracks. Next up at number 6 now, we have Der Grossmann. This creature's name translates to the tall man. He's said to live in Germany's Black Forest, a place named by the Romans for its impenetrable darkness. The tall man may be the basis for the Slenderman urban legend that I'm sure you've all heard. He is a tall, disfigured being with only white spheres where his eyes should be. They say he is a fairy who chases bad children that find themselves lost in the forest. He never stops chasing them, even beyond the woods. woods unless he catches them or they tell their parents all the bad things they have done. Even then, that might not be enough. One account from 1702 came from a man who lived in the Black Forest. He said, "My son came into my bedroom yesterday screaming at the top of his lungs that the angel is outside. I asked him what he was talking about and he told me some nonsense fairy story about Der Grossman. He said he went into the groves by our village and found one of my cows dead, hanging from a tree. I found nothing of it at first, but now he is gone. We must find my son and my family must leave before we are all killed. I am sorry, my son. I should have listened. May God forgive me." Don't know about you, I think that sounds a lot like Slenderman. Moving on to number 5 now, guys, we have Frankenstein Castle. Yes, this place was the inspiration for the original Frankenstein novel. It was built over 1,000 years ago and inhabited by various members of the Frankenstein family until they died out in the 1600s. The last member of the family was killed in a chariot accident on his way to visit his one true love, Anne Marie. She was left waiting for him and died of a broken heart. Now, she is said to wander the castle looking for her lost love while he wanders elsewhere, both of them trying to find each other in the afterlife. Another owner was Conrad Dippel von Frankenstein. Amazing name. He was said to be a real-life monster in the form of an alchemist, scientist and grave robber. He used to experiment with bodies trying to reanimate the dead, yes, just like the original story. The townspeople eventually stormed the castle to stop him, but before they could catch him, he drank one of his own potions and died. Now the creatures he created are said to roam the land nearby and his ghost still haunts the many rooms looking for eternal life. Next up at number 4 now we have the Naxxera. This terrifying creature is basically a Germanic vampire. They are cursed creatures that require humans to survive, but it's not in the traditional vampire way. They don't suck blood, they simply devour whole bodies, kind of like a zombie vampire hybrid. You cannot become one from being bitten or scratched either. They are most commonly created when someone commits suicide or dies from an accidental death. If a large group of people die of a disease, the first person to have died will become a Naxxera. When they first wake up, they devour their whole family, or if they get desperate, they even start eating themselves. Some people believe that they leave their graves, shapeshift into a pig, and then visit their family members to feast on their blood. Perhaps the most chilling way that these creatures kill people is by their shadows. It's believed that death will instantly befall anyone who is covered with the shadow of this creature. Another reason to keep an eye out for any moving shadows at night. Next up at number 3 now we have the Pied Piper. This is perhaps one of the most famous ones on our whole list. In 1284, in the German town of Hamelin, a story emerged that was spread across the world. The town was suffering from a rat infestation when the Pied Piper arrived. He claimed to be a rat catcher and promised the mayor that he could save them all. The mayor was desperate and agreed, promising to pay the Pied Piper for all of his work. With that, the Pied Piper pulled out his pipe and walked around the town. The rats came pouring out from their hiding places as he played. They were transfixed by the music, following its sound like zombies. The Pied Piper then lured the rats into the Weser River where they all drowned. Despite completing the job, the mayor refused to pay the Pied Piper. He said it was a scam and that the Pied Piper had actually brought the rats in there in the first place. The Piper stormed out of town, vowing his revenge. One day he returned when all the adults were in church. This time he played his pipe and attracted all of the town's children. 130 children followed him into a cave and were never seen again. Next up at number 2 now we have the SMS Emden. This ship was completed in 1909 and sailed all over the world before being sunk just off Germany's northern coast. It was returning from a long journey around the whole world. On the day of its return, loved ones of the sailors were gathered at the harbour ready to welcome them home. However, the harbour master refused them entrance due to a personal grudge. As they waited, a storm brewed. It got worse and worse, battering the ship until it could hold out no longer. The Emden sank and there were no survivors. The distraught families cried out in pain across the harbour. In the centuries since then, many locals report the same thing. On a full moon, especially on a stormy night, the ghost ship of the SMS Emden can be seen bobbing over there on the horizon, trying desperately to stay afloat, but always to no avail. And finally, number 1 now we have the Drood. In Germanic folklore, this is an evil nocturnal spirit associated with nightmares. They were said to take part in what's known as the Wild Hunt, a surge of spirits and supernatural beings that were said to bring war or plague or death to anyone who witnessed it. it. They are often said to be female in appearance, resembling a young woman. They appear in people's houses when they are asleep and sit on them, crushing their mind in their nightmares and their bodies in real life until they give out and die. Once the deed is done, the druid changes appearance and becomes old and ugly. She is pale and thin. Her feet have 3 large toes, one of which is pointing backwards. Perhaps the most scary thing about a druid is that nothing can stop it from getting to you if it wants to. They are said to be able to enter anywhere, through a window, a crack in the door, even a keyhole. They can even transform into a feather. According to some people, she will never speak but is always recognizable by the sound of her footsteps as you drift off to sleep. It's thought that a druid is actually an ancient princess who has been unable to find rest for 1,000 years because she couldn't find a prince. Now she crushes sleeping men as some sort of twisted revenge.